Hello, I am Purnendu Chatterjee, member of the Expert Committee on School Education. With me are my two colleagues. On my left, Ratul Guho.
Hello.
And on my right, Anindo Sengupta.
Hello.
In this session, we will take you through the classroom dynamics of English as second language for classes 3, 4, and 5. Now, as an introduction to this session, we need to understand that the more of 21st century education has underwent a sea change. The concept of quality education has made its strong imprints on the educational panorama. And the difficulty is increased by the fact that quality is an abstract noun. And to concretize an abstract entity is more difficult, more challenging than to find quality in a product or a goods that is tangible. For that matter, quality education, in order to reach at some type of defining idea of what is quality education, and education to become quality education must fulfill 4 important aspects. 1, that particular education should provide knowledge content. An education which does not provide a knowledge content cannot be called a quality education. The second aspect is the skill. An education content must teach students the ability to apply the skill areas, the ability to do something, the ability to take their knowledge and transform those knowledge into practice. Knowledge only learned is of no use. Knowledge taken at its face value, just for the sake of knowledge, is of no use. What is important is to implement those knowledge into practice. So, the second aspect of quality education is skill. The third aspect of quality education is values, that the knowledge learned and the knowledge implemented must not be done in such a way as to harm others. So, there is an ethical component to knowledge. That knowledge should have a certain value attached to it. And the fourth aspect of quality education is the component of behavior. Behavior, as we know it in the English language, is not the behavior that we know in terms of pedagogy. Behavior takes a different connotation in pedagogy. Behavior in pedagogy means the willingness to apply what is learned. Now, if we miss any of these factors, the education provided would not be quality education. Now, coming to the area of English. English is taught in schools as a second language. Therefore, since English becomes a second language, what becomes so significant is that English has to be learned. The teaching learning process is more important in the case of second language than in the case of the first language. Because in the case of first language, the knowledge is often acquired from informal social institutions and structures. But in case of second language, not every society gives the scope that a child will become conversant with English. And hence, English as second language needs more the formal structure of the school to be learned. Therefore, and since learning a second language, it becomes more important. Therefore, the factor of teaching the second language also becomes important. The teaching-learning process, hence, in case of an English second language, is of a dynamic nature. Dynamic is in the sense that while the teacher provides the knowledge associated or related with the English language, and the students learn those features, learn those skills or functional areas, they also apply it in their classrooms. And as they apply, their knowledge is enriched. And whatever knowledge is found to be faulty is remediated by the teacher herself or himself. Now, coming to this dynamic process of classroom transaction in terms of English as a second language, what stands unique is this, that among all the other subjects that a student of class 3, 4, or 5 takes up in the classroom, English is the only skill-based subject. There are 4 skills in English: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Out of these 4 skills, in listening and reading, what the students do is that they receive something. They don't produce anything in listening or reading. So listening and reading, they are called the receptive skills. While the other 2 skills, that of speaking and writing, is where the students produce something, where the students write something or speak something. And therefore, speaking and writing are called productive skills. In addition to these 4 skills, there is also the functional areas of grammar and vocabulary. So, if we look at English as a second language, we find that there is a skill domain and a functional area domain. However, and very interestingly, neither the skill domain nor the functional area domain can work in isolation. They are very much interconnected. For instance, if one is writing something, one needs the functional areas of grammar and vocabulary. When one is reading something, in order to comprehend the meaning of a given text, again the vocabulary part, the grammar structures become important. And after reading, say, a text, one is made to write an answer. That is where the reading skill, which is receptive, and the writing skill, which is productive, they overlap each other. So, it's a beautiful mosaic that the English second language classroom really has in its scope. The skills overlap, the functional areas come in, and there are evolving forms and dissolving patterns of the English as second language area. Hence, as I will ask my colleague Anindya Sengupta to give some examples of these skill areas, relating to the class 3, class 4 and class 5 English textbooks, as well as related to the support materials that have been developed for class 3, 4 and 5, which are titled as Wings. Anindya.
Thank you, Purnendu. You have already pointed out that English in our state is mostly taught, or rather mostly learned by the students as second language. Particularly in the primary level, English is learned, not acquired, because it is not the child's native language. Now, the fact is that all the teachers you know very well that in class 1 and 2 there is an integrated book called Amar Boi or My Book, and then from class 3 onwards we have a separate English textbook called Butterfly, and there is a support material called Wings. Butterfly has certain text materials, reading materials meant for reading comprehension as well as for grammatical and vocabulary development. Wings also gives further scope for the readers, for the students to go through them and thereby enhance their skills. When we talk about skills, we mean that while we are using the language, what we require is certain skill to express ourselves. But before that, we also need certain skill to understand the language. So, when we are understanding the language, there are two ways of grasping it. We call it receptive skills. One is reading or reading skill, the other is listening skill, whereas the application part comes in the form of writing skill and speaking skill. Interestingly, listening skill and speaking skill, they do not actually work in isolation. As we are talking, as my colleague Purnendu Chatterjee has been talking, all of you and myself, we are all listening to him. So, there is a speaking skill as well as listening skill, so that there is a continuity. In the same way, in classroom situation, the listening and speaking skill, they occur simultaneously, but the teacher has to be very careful to arrange a listening speaking activity so that the child speaks. Generally, we see it is a teacher talk. The teacher speaks, the child listens to it. But how much the child understands, whether the child only hears and not listens, that is more important. We have to find out whether he is only hearing and not understanding, or whether he is hearing and understanding and listening and responding either in writing or in the form of a speaking activity. So, then comes the involvement of the child. So, in the textbook, we have designed materials, particularly Butterfly, the English textbook for class 3, has been introduced in 2013, and at the same time the first chapter, that is My Friends, that is basically an imaginative fictional storyline that talks of a young girl who considers some domestic animals to be her friends. Now, who are these friends? She considers Minnie the cat, then the cow, then the sheep as her friends. What is the objective of actually making the learner, making the child reading the text? The objective is that the child will go through it, understand the message of the story. For making the child understand the storyline, what is given there is something that the child knows. In short, the child knows that around her or him there are lots of animals which are around her. She observes the child, she knows what those animals are called, again in her own native language, in her own mother tongue, and also various parts of the body, what those animals eat, their babies are called, their activities, she knows everything. But the child does not know the English terms of those things. The English term of the baby of a dog, cat, cow, sheep, their sounds, what food they eat, and so on. So, this part is called the knowledge part. That knowledge part is developed through the reading, and as the child reads, the child accumulates more words, the vocabulary is developed, and thereby the child has a certain knowledge about the domestic animals that are there around her. Along with it, as the reading skill is enhanced, the child is allowed to participate in a kind of an activity which actually helps the child to express herself in the form of speaking, or express herself in the form of a writing activity. Say for example, in the exercise given there, the child is asked to write a few lines about a dog, about a domestic animal, where she writes that my favorite animal or the animal I like most is a dog, and so on, whatever information she has. Now, that skill of presenting the knowledge or applying the knowledge in written words is the writing skill. See, from it is a transference of skill from reading skill to writing skill, and then again from reading skill to speaking skill, and the conversation between the children that develops the listening as well as the speaking skill. So, in short, the listening and speaking skill also leads to the writing skill, where the child's thought process is more matured, more synchronized, and there is some cohesiveness in whatever he or she writes. It is not like that she is writing 3-4 sentences in isolation, where one sentence has no relation with the second sentence. When the child can actually write 3-4 sentences or 30 or 40 words short paragraph with cohesion, which has cohesion, which has some organized thought, that shows the application of her skill in written form. One more thing is required for the child's expression, that is vocabulary. As I said, in fact, Dr. Chatterjee has already mentioned that apart from the 4 major skills LSRW, or that is listening, speaking, reading and writing, there are 2 other major skills we call functional skills. One is the grammar and the other is the vocabulary. So, when we write something or when we are actually presenting something orally, what we require is a sentence structure. It is not that we speak words in isolation, because if words are spoken in isolation, it does not carry any meaning. So, words have to be matched according to the grammatical structure. So, that is another basic feature. In the textbook, grammar has been taught under the heading let us learn. Let us learn in all the chapters of Butterfly, in all classes, that is in class 3, class 4, class 5, we have a section there called let us learn. Now, in that let us learn, grammar has been taught, but again not in isolation. Grammar should be taught in a context. That is why the references are taken from the text. As for instance, in the first chapter, that is my friends, indefinite article and definite article are taught, but the examples or references are taken, are cited from the usage in the lesson, and then it has been explained, analyzed to differentiate which one is a definite article, or that is the, and why do we call the, when the is applied, when a is applied, and in what case an is applied. So, after that analysis, we come to the application area, that is we call it let us do, as if the writer of the textbook takes the children along with them and gets into an activity of doing out certain exercises, certain activities where the child has to apply a and the in appropriate places. So, what here it is indicated is that it is, we call it an inductive process of grammar acquisition, or rather grammar learning. Inductive process of grammar learning in the sense that we first see the references, the language references, that is where actually in a context those particular language items are used, and then we try to analyze, and then at the same time from those analysis we come to know how and where those particular language items are used. And after that particular knowledge is gained, we take the children into an activity which is the application area. So, the skills along with the listening, speaking, reading and writing, the 4 major skills, we have this grammar area, and we also have the vocabulary area. The vocabulary includes synonyms, the vocabulary includes antonyms, it includes the various sounds of the animals, the various words we used for the children of the animals, and so on. Teachers, you must have noticed that in every section of the textbook there is a term used, we call it word trove, as if it is a small kind of very miniature kind of a dictionary type, where certain words which are unknown to the child, they are highlighted and the meanings are given. The main purpose is to enhance the vocabulary, the word stock of the children. Butterfly, in class 3, there are various chapters. Not only we actually talk about the environment, because the theme of Butterfly for class 3 is the world around us. So, when we talk about the world around us, it talks about the domestic animals, talks about wild animals, it talks about the various waters, plants, as well as the vehicles. So, it talks about what is around the child, all the social environment, all the plant environment that is around the child, and the child, like a roving eye, moves around and sees everything around her, and that is there in the textbook. But it also generates not only knowledge, but it also generates some values. There are some stories which has certain morals, of course, like taken from Hitopodesh or taken from Panchatantra, that are included in the textbook. But at the same time, there are certain conversations, like there is a chapter called Water, where there is a discussion between a mother and child about the use of water. And although we have water, but we do not know how important water is to us, and what will happen if we waste water or if we actually pollute water. But rather unknowingly or knowingly, we pollute water, for which lot of things happen. We often suffer for that. So, it is an issue that has to be dealt. The child knows the usage of water and the importance of water in life. That actually brings in a behavioral change in the child's life, as Dr. Chatterjee has been pointing out. That quality education does not mean that the child only learns the textbook, reads the textbook, crams the textbook, and then in the assignment or examination, rather almost we call it quote unquote vomits, presents it and then forgets all about it. It means that the child learns, applies it in real life, and there is a behavioral change in the child's life, and there are certain values that actually come to the child. So, if education is only a degree, no, it does not mean a degree. It means that the education helps him to overcome various problems in life, and at the same time to be a true man, to be a true citizen of the country. So, in talking about this, we have another textbook along with this, that is butterfly, that is wings. Along with butterfly, there is a support material called wings, which is basically a help. Help in the sense, it is not that one textbook rather talks of something else, whereas the other textbook talks about something different. The more the child gets into practice, the more the child gets into various kinds of activities, the more the child gets exposure to the language. This exposure to the language develops the skill of the child and gives a platform to the child to apply his knowledge and skill in that platform, which the child does not get. In our society, most children, they do not have that ample scope of viewing English TV programs, or rather listening to TV, reading English newspapers, or any other form of storybooks. So, textbook is the major reading material to the child, for which in wings we have short stories. Again, these are all imaginative fictional stories that helps the reading comprehension of the child, and also gives a platform to develop the grammatical areas, and at the same time the vocabulary section, which is termed as word trove, that has been highlighted, where the pronunciation of those words in English form, the syllabic division is given, so that the child learns the spelling of those particular words, which are rather new or unknown to the child, the application in form of an English sentence, and the meaning is given in the mother tongue of the child, so that the child does not have to look into a dictionary to know the meaning or ask anybody. The book itself is a help, is a tool, and at the same time a help, a guide to rather acquire, to rather learn the skills of the language, and thereby help the child to progress in life, in educational life. And this book, Wings, is basically a complement to the main textbook, Butterfly. This basically is rather comprehensively, if we look at what is the main motive of writing the two textbooks, Butterfly and Wings. I hand over to Dr. Chatterjee about the further introduction to this topic.
Thank you, Anindya Sengupta. What Anindya has basically said is this, that the textbooks here, the text materials here, whether it be in Butterfly book or in Wings textbook, Wings support material, is that these textbooks act as a vehicles to bring to students certain skill areas or certain functional areas or both. So, unlike first language, where textbooks are read for the purpose of literature and aesthetic joy, in second language the texts are mere vehicles to carry to the students different skills, sets and functional areas. On this note, I would like to invite my colleague Ratul Guho to particularly highlight upon the mechanism through which Wings and Butterfly complement each other or can complement each other in the classroom. Ratul.
Thank you, Purnendu-da and Anindya-da, for developing such a fantastic premises upon which I can draw some thumb rules as far as English as second language teaching learning dynamics is concerned. So, thumb rule 1, as we all know that the first language is acquired and second language is learned. As first language, we need not learn grammar first, we already use the language as we acquire it from the neighborhood, and second language we will learn because we don't get the exposure of second language from our neighborhood, from the world we belong to. So, the thumb rule 1 is that whenever we are entering the English as a second language class, so it's a role to somehow bring more exposure, more experience of the language to the children, so that from the exposure, from the experience, they can pick up for learning that language. That's the first thumb rule. The second thumb rule is that in many classes, maybe we come across situations when we see that rules and rules. So, rules are usually rule. We talk about the language. We must remember, this is very important. English second language period is not about sharing some rules regarding the language. English as second language period is not meant for communicating some rules regarding the language. It's rather about the application of the language. So, whenever we as teachers will make our plan of action for the period, we'll keep it in mind that I myself as a teacher not going to burden the children with lots of rules only. I'll try to develop my pedagogical process in such a manner so that the application of the language remains the pivotal area of focus. I should develop the plan of action in such a manner the children are provided situations where they are invited to use the language, because the life of a language, the the effectiveness of a language remains in the application of the language. That's the second thumb rule. Now here comes the third point when we are developing a plan of action for the period. See, in a textbook, as for butterfly and wings in our class 3-4 level, we get some text materials, say for some poems, some prose pieces. So we call it the literature. Now, the difference between the use of literature in first language and second language has to be taken care of. Say, for first language, the language has already been acquired by the child. So, language in first language helps the student to understand the essence of literature. In first language classes, the language works as a bridge to reach the essence of literature. But in case of second language, the situation is just the opposite. In second language class, literature helps the student to enable themselves in the domain of usage of the language. The prose pieces, the poems, the text pieces, they help the students by providing some exposure of the language. So here literature works as the bridge to reach the application of the language. So in first language, language is the bridge, literature is the destination. In second language, literature is the bridge and language is the application of the language is the destination. So these are the basic thumb rules. One is acquisition of first language and learning of second language. Second is the motive of the English second language class should be learning the application of the language. Third is using literature as a bridge to reach the domain where I find myself to be enabled in using the language. Now, as Anindoda and Purnendoda, both of them were saying that we have 4 skills in our English, in our language: speaking, listening, reading, writing, and 2 functional areas, grammar and vocabulary. So let us, in both the books, in Butterfly and Wings, these 4 skills have been taken care of, and there are provisions in grammar and vocabulary learning. Now, let us go bit by bit. In case of reading skill, which is a receptive skill, as Purnendoda and Anindoda has pointed out. In case of reading skill, we must remember 2 way of reading. One is scanning, another is skimming. By saying scanning, we mean to pick out, to find out, to locate specific information from the text. We call it to scan. So whenever we are reading a text, it is our primary responsibility to scan specific information, and then with the help of the information, with the support from the information, we can have a meaning of small paragraphs. Say, let's have an example. Suppose in a text there are 6 paragraphs, 6 small paragraphs. So what we can do first? The first paragraph of the text, we scan the text, we scan the paragraph, and we find out the important information. And using the information, we can have a gist of the first paragraph, having the gist meaning of the first paragraph, which we call the skimming. So finding the information is scanning, and finding the gist meaning is called skimming. So whenever we will be getting a long text, let us not go by whole. We will go from part to whole. We will divide the text in small paragraphs, and then we will find important information from each paragraph, and then we will make the gist meaning for each of the paragraph. Then interdeleting the gist meaning of each paragraph, we will get the complete meaning of the entire text. So at the time of reading, we will use scanning and skimming one by one. For each part of the text, we will have small sort of scanning, then a gist meaning for the paragraph. Then the second paragraph will scan and then make the gist meaning, that is skimming. Then the third paragraph, we will scan the third paragraph, finding out information, important information, having the gist meaning of the third paragraph, which we call skimming. By doing this, scanning each paragraph and skimming each paragraph, we can have the complete meaning of entire text. So at the time, this is our fourth thumb rule. So whenever we will be providing support to the students, telling them how to read, this how to read will be followed by scanning and skimming of each part of the text. This is the fourth thumb rule. The fifth thumb rule we will remember at the time of writing. See, in writing there are so many things, maybe a paragraph, maybe a letter, and all those things. But the important thing is that, suppose if a writing is a wall, then each sentence works as a brick. If a writing is a wall, then each sentence works as a brick. So if the bricks are faulty, if the bricks have problem within themselves, we cannot make a wall. So likewise, if we have to develop a piece of writing, then sentence works as brick. So the prior importance to be given how to construct a correct sentence. If sentences are constructed in a correct manner, then we can reorganize those sentences in different forms, in different expression of writing. So whenever we will be getting into the writing classroom, our basic focus would be to find out correct sentences from the students, and then tell them how to organize and reorganize those sentences in a specific writing form. This is to be remembered whenever we are getting into the writing class. This was the sixth thumb rule. Now the next thumb rule is about grammar. I'll come back to the other skills, speaking and listening a little later. So before that, I am getting into those functional areas, grammar and vocabulary. As far grammar is concerned, one thing has to be remembered with intense focus, that we should not make the plan of action for grammar classroom from definition to example. That should not be, as Anindya was saying as well, that should not be the way of teaching grammar or learning grammar. We should not tell the definition. Let's, for an example, say present perfect tense. We should not tell first what is present perfect tense, then followed by grammar, followed by example. That should not be the way. First, we should be giving some examples, some exposures. Say there will be three sentences all having present perfect tense, right? Then the teacher should explain the similar point found among those sentences. Which is similar in each of the sentences? Which point is similar? Then the teacher would explain those similar points, similar structures, similar themes about the use of verb. So by doing that, the teacher would come to the conclusion. So in those three sentences, as you have found, we have a specific use of the verb, we have a specific use of the tense, and this is what we call the present perfect tense. So exposure or example followed by explanation. Then the explanation would be concretized in the form of definition. This type of structure is called present perfect tense, or this is the time when we use the present perfect tense. So exposure or example followed by explanation, followed by concretization in the form of definition, and then followed by more and more examples for the students and more drilling for the students. So the way of learning grammar shouldn't be from definition to example, rather from exposure or example, then followed by explanation, followed by concretization through definition, followed by more examples and drilling. This should be the way how we should expect the learners to learn grammar in English as second language class. This is a very important thumb rule. And in case of vocabulary, we should be very cautious about just finding a meaning of the word is not vocabulary all about. Finding a meaning of the word is just having the meaning, memorizing the meaning. A word from meaning to the meaning of a word is elevated to the vocabulary of a student. If I can use a word according to the need of the situation, if I just know the meaning of the word, that's not sufficient. If I can know the meaning of the word and then I can use it contextually in different contexts, in various contexts, then only this word becomes a part of my vocabulary. Then only the word becomes a part of my vocabulary. Only knowing the meaning is not enough. Knowing the meaning and then use the word according to the need of the situation in different context, then it becomes a part of my vocabulary. So, just knowing the meaning of the word in a very decontextualized manner is not enough. This has to be remembered by us when we are entering a class, keeping in mind the vocabulary learning of students. Now then comes the next thumb rule comes regarding the listening speaking. As Purnenduda and Aninduda, both of them were saying, say language primarily is a speech act. Language primarily is a speech act. Now here listening and speaking are very important because language primarily is a speech act. Now hearing and listening are not the same thing. See, if I hear something and I don't pay attention, this is not listening. If I suppose I am walking along the road and somebody said something to somebody and I just hear, I am like a passerby, I just hear. It's not listening. Attentive hearing becomes listening. So hearing plus attention becomes listening. So whenever we are in the classroom, we should be keeping stress not on hearing, rather on listening, because attentive hearing is listening. And as Anindoda and Purnendoda, both of them are saying, listening and speaking, they complement each other, because listening is a receptive skill and speaking is a productive skill. Here we should remember one thing with a lot of focus, that maybe it's ideally in English second language classes it's best if we use only English, but reality doesn't always allow that particular situation. And as we all know that we learn best in our first language, so we can have a balance between these two antithetical poles, whether or not to. Shall I use first language in a second language class, or shall I not use first language in a second language class? So we need to have a balance in between these two antithetical poles. Yeah, in many important educational documents, it has been mentioned that if first language is used judiciously, in a second language class, then first language works as a help, not as a hindrance. So, as a thumb rule, will make it sure we should not use first language in a second language class in such a manner so that it becomes a burden. Let us not just translate the second language pieces into first language, then it becomes a hindrance, then it becomes a burden. If we can take the help of first language very judiciously in the meaning making process of the second language words or sentences, then it will help us a lot in providing the comfort zone to the students in the case of second language learning. As Purnenduda was saying, in case of quality education, it's so very important that learning should take place free from anxiety and trauma. So if we just give them a lot of foreign language words that works as second language in English second language classes, a lot of second language words, sentences and exposure might create a sense of anxiety and trauma in the classroom. So we can use in first language in a very judicious manner so that English, the first language, works as a support in the learning of second language. So this judicious word, how to use it judiciously, is completely upon my beloved teachers, how they use it. But the one thing should be remembered, we should not just translate the second language text in first language. That's very important. So these were the skills and functional areas. Now before getting into wings, I will just remember, I'll just point out one more thing. While giving activities to the students, we will use rubric. Now what is a rubric? What is a rubric? Now, rubric is an evaluation scale. Rubric is an evaluation scale where the numbers are given along with the quality components for that activity. Now, rubric is an evaluation scale where numbers or quantity is given along with the quality components. As you can see in the slide, that there is a rubric for paragraph writing. You can see in the slide there is a rubric in the paragraph for paragraph writing. There you can see the 4 components required for paragraph writing, and there is a scale. As the students are using all the components, students are having all the components in their writing, paragraph writing, they will get the highest scale. If the student just misses out one particular point, one particular component, then they get the second scale. If the students miss out 2 components, they get the third scale. So this structure, number or quantity along with the components is called the rubric. I will request my beloved teachers to develop rubrics for each activity, basically where the students are expected to express themselves, to develop activities and use those rubrics, develop rubrics for activities and use those rubrics in the classroom process, because in your summative questions you cannot give rubrics. So just have the habit, have the practice of using rubric in the classroom process, then it would help the students to understand or to just definitize their focus, concretize their focus on specific components regarding that particular activity. Suppose for this example, the student can, if this be the rubric of the paragraph, the students can easily concretize or focus on these 4 components whenever they will be able to write the paragraph, whenever they will try to write the paragraph. This is the rubric of paragraph. For letter there will be another rubric. For story there will be another rubric. The students will have to understand the rubric properly before they go for the activity. The students must understand the rubric properly before they get into writing the activity, get into writing the particular piece of writing skill is very, very important. And as Anindada was saying, wings as a support material has been introduced to be used along with butterfly in class 3, class 4, and wings works as a complementary, supplementary learning content for butterfly. In wings, all the grammar, all the skill, functional areas have been utilized, have been provided, so that the students have a lot of scope for worksheets and practice. I just would like to mention one very important thing. See, in each lesson of butterfly there is only one text material. Suppose there in butterfly lesson 2 there is a text material, one text. But in wings lesson 2 for class 4 butterfly there is class 4 butterfly lesson 2 one text material. But in class 4 wings there are 2 text material. One we call the pre-reading text material, another we call the post-reading text material. The how to synchronize the text materials of wings with the text material of butterfly. Our suggestion would be, you start off with the wings, say for lesson 1 or lesson 2, say for example lesson 2, you want to go for lesson 2, both for butterfly and wings. Then start off with wings. First do the pre-reading, the first reading text of wings. Let the students understand that, comprehend them. Let the students do the activities given in the wings. For lesson 2, the first reading text, the pre-reading text, it's done. Then go to butterfly, do the reading text, do the activities, fine, it's done. Then come back to wings again for the second reading text of wings. So first wings followed by butterfly followed by wings. That is how we can synchronize wings with butterfly. So these are all I had in a nutshell to communicate to you. So please remember these particular thumb rules which would help you to have a very dynamic classroom process as far English second language is concerned. And we believe with the support that you provide towards the students will be applying the language, apply English as second language so very contextually according to the need of the situation. Thank you so much, Purnendu.
Thank you, Ratul. As we go into the wrap of this session, into the conclusion of this session, two very important things stand out. One, that there is no definite methodology to be followed. The methodology that suits you best, that suits your students best, is your methodology. Don't worry about the different jargons of English second language teaching methodologies. Whatever the methodology supports you best, go by that. Don't go by rules, go by the practicum. What applies to your classroom is the best. And secondly, in terms of vocabulary and the judicious use of mother tongue, the point is that if you start an academic session with a group of students needing, say, a 90% support of the mother tongue, and towards the end of that academic session, you are seeing that the students now require a sort of a 75 to 77% support. So that's a huge success from your end. So please don't shy away from using mother tongue, because there is no taboo in using mother tongue in an English second language classroom. The whole purpose being the students' learning of the different skills and functional areas. So with this, I conclude this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.